All right, in this series, we're talking all about the art and craft of practicing. And we talk with great musicians and educators here. And we have one such person, the amazing Dr. Shawn Purcell, who's a great jazz guitarist, educator, arranger, and composer. And Shawn, can you give us a little bit of an overview about your background?
Absolutely, Greg. And hey, thank you so much for having me on. This is really an honor, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, my current teaching position, I teach. I'm adjunct professor of jazz studies at George Mason University, which is just a stone's throw outside of Washington D.C., about 15 minutes in Fairfax County, Virginia. I've been there for about 10 years. Prior to that, I taught at Towson University for a couple years up in Baltimore. I've been on the faculty at West Virginia University. Briefly, I was on the faculty at Indiana University back in 2011. And then I guess prior to that, Middle Tennessee State University. And then my wife and I did our doctorates at Illinois, University of Illinois, and we were the TAs there during our time. But there were no guitar or voice teachers, so we were essentially the professors of those respective instruments.
Wow, so you have a very strong educational background.
We've been teaching for longer than I care to mention, but yeah, it's been a while, but it's been great.
And you've performed with all sorts of people I see in your bio: Terrell Stafford, Nicholas Payton, Tim Warfield. One of the things that really stood out to me is your service as a member of the military big bands, which, as far as I know, are like the premier ensembles in the military, the Airmen of Note and the Navy Commodores, right?
Yeah, I did 8 years with the Note, and then I actually got out of the military for 8 years. And I was a free man. I never really planned on getting back in, and then I got back in 2011, and I was in the Navy Commodores. Did that for about roughly 12 or 12 and a half years, and I just retired last year. I think they said my service, it was like 20 years, 3 months, and a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. So I retired last year.
Yeah, that's amazing. And maybe that's a good place to start with a question, because to me, when I think of military, I think of discipline, structure, being super productive, that kind of thing. Would you say, is that a defining characteristic of yourself and your practicing? Does that go into your practicing habits?
I would love to be more focused and more diligent and more structured with my practice. The funny thing is, the military bands, like, we are in the military, but it's still a bunch of jazz musicians wearing a military uniform. So, it was a structured environment, but I don't know if I carried anything over from the military. I tended to be fairly structured when I was younger. With my practice. Now, not so much anymore, just due to time constraints and all that stuff. But yeah, I tried to bring that to the military, but the gig itself didn't necessarily instill any kind of discipline as far as practicing.
Okay, so it's really a separate kind of entity, but you're still somewhat, with the military culture, right?
Sure, you are, and the bands were really like some really high level musicians, like incredible players that I got the honor to play with. So really the structure and the discipline was just me realizing that, like, man, if I stand up tonight and just like play a terrible solo, like, other members of the band are just going to start to look over like, hey, what's going on here? So definitely, like, the level of the group kept everybody honest and, working towards playing at their highest level every night, just because, you wouldn't get called on it initially, but at some point you would be called out, like, if your parts weren't together or playing wasn't together. So,
right.
Yeah.
But what an amazing opportunity to have that consistency of that kind of gig. And I mean, you guys were traveling extensively and doing clinics and things like that, and performances, and playing with different guest artists.
Yeah, we did, like, with the Note, my 8 years with the Airmen of Note, I think we were in like 19 different countries.
Wow.
I think my first year it was like 150 gigs, and about 3 months of that was on the road. The Commodores, we didn't travel abroad like the Airmen of Note did, but we would do a tour every year throughout the States, and then we had a international saxophone symposium. So every year we would host, like we had Miguel Zanon, Lucas Pino was a recent guest.
Mm-hmm.
They've had like Walt Weiskopf, Branford Marsalis, like all heavyweight saxophonists every year that we would host.
Right.
And we'd play festival, like the Gen Conference, the Trumpet Guild conferences, and we'd always get to play with a big name artist at those events. So that was really cool, just because we were always working on new music, and the artists ranged from like super uber traditional like bebop players to uber modern. So we were able to kind of digest all of that all those different sounds into the big band setting.
So it's a very diverse experience.
It was, and like it was. I don't want to say the gig wasn't 100% artistic, but we were kind of the face of the military for the general public. So I would say half, if you came to see like a Navy Commodores concert, for instance, about half of it is what the band wanted to play, and about half of it was what we knew we needed to play.
Okay.
So that we would, be able to entertain and please like a large portion of the audience, rather than have people that didn't like jazz go away thinking, man, I really didn't like that.
That's smart. That makes sense.
Yes. So, but yeah, it was a great experience. And like I said, the level of musicianship just continually increased. Like it seemed like every person we replaced, the next person was slightly better, and so on and so forth. So the level just kept getting higher and higher. So it's super grateful that I was able to do that for 2 decades, for sure.
I'm curious what the process is of getting into the Airmen of Note or the Commodores, what the audition process is, and when do these opportunities open up? How long are people holding a certain position for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I can speak to my experience. When I joined the Airmen of Note, basically they advertised in the Old Musicians Union paper. So my grandfather, who was a trombonist, great trombonist, just happened to tell me, hey, the Air Force Airmen of Note's looking for a guitar player. You should submit materials. So I submitted, I think at that point, a cassette, sent off my cassette tape, and got a call from the guitar player at the time, Wayne Wilkinson, who's a great guitar player. Okay. And they invited me out to a live audition, and they kind of put me through the ringer. I think the audition was about an hour and 20 minutes. And at the end of the day, they offered me the job. I accepted it, and then I started the process of actually joining the military after that.
And does somebody stay in there for as long as they want, or is there a certain time period?
Yeah, depending on your rank. Like, so the DC bands where I was, you could definitely stay for 20. And then depending on your promotion, like if you got promoted a couple times, like you could stay up to 30 years was like absolute max. So I got out a little bit after 20, but yeah, there are players that hold their chair for 30 years.
Wow.
And so it literally means like the Navy Commodores guitar position is closed the whole time that I'm there. And they just replaced, I don't know if you've ever met him, but a Philadelphia guitar player by the name of Ben Turner.
No.
He plays in New York sometimes and went to Michigan. He actually is the guy that replaced me last year.
Okay.
So if he decides to make it a career, like the Commodore's guitar chair is basically shut down for 20 or more years now.
Wow. It's almost rare. Like being on the Supreme Court or something.
Yes. Hopefully more fun than that. Yeah.
So tell me, when you were younger, though, is there a period of time when you went through a very intense period of practice? Was there a specific period of time where you felt you advanced the most?
Yeah, I would say, like, for sure, like in the jazz genre. So like in high school, I was super into rock. So I was practicing a lot, but I was like, Eddie Van Halen, Steve Vai, like Yngwie Malmsteen, all that stuff. When I got to college, like I did my undergrad at Duquesne University. And, I think right out of the gate, my freshman year, I just started practicing. Like I essentially became obsessed with jazz, and I was listening to Jimmy Rainey, checking out Pat Metheny. Like I had found John Schofield at the time. So I was just obsessed with all these players, and like I wanted to play like that. Like I wanted to do that. I wanted to play with players like that. And so I got pretty obsessive about practicing. Like I'd say my second semester of my freshman year, and then that carried all the way through my undergrad. Like if I wasn't gigging, I was practicing. Like I always joke with my students, like I didn't have a girlfriend when I was in college. Like I hung out with people that were
it was your guitar.
It was my guitar, yeah. So like I hung out with other players that were like, just all we did was like practice, go to clubs to see like the local, like the more well-established veterans in town, practice, do gigs, do what I needed to get through my courses that I didn't necessarily love as much, and then just get back to the guitar.
And do you remember the kind of things that you were working on during that period of time?
Yeah, I was like, for some reason I had an odd obsession right out of the gate with that I wanted to be able to just play straight eighth note lines through whatever set of chord changes was put in front of me. So I spent a lot of time just like picking off, like transcribing solos. Like I was transcribing like Freddie Hubbard and Clifford Brown, and just figuring out how are these guys putting together their lines. My teacher, Ken Karsh, turned me on to Pat Martino, gave me like a cassette tape of Pat. And I was just like, man, the lines were just, for some reason, like, I don't know why, the lines just immediately became this obsession with me. So I would just transcribe, work on 2/5s, just anything to like if you walked by my practice room, my main goal was to have someone say like, oh, Shawn must be working on what is this thing called love. Like I can hear that in his playing.
So like, trying to develop very clear lines that outline the harmony.
Yeah, just speak the language.
So, coming from more of that rock background that you mentioned, what was the bridge to jazz? Was it that transcribing, or how did you make that first jump from, maybe soloing on a blues with the blues scale, or maybe just playing some basic, major scales into bebop lines, jazz language?
Sure. So my dad was a really great jazz trombone player. So even in high school, I didn't really love jazz at that point, but he was already putting me on gigs that I absolutely should not have been playing on. But we were playing like standards and jazz tunes, rhythm changes, blues, other kind of commercial tunes, and he just expected that I could play these tunes. So even in high school, I was kind of getting into it, but I just didn't love it yet. I was sort of doing it because I had to, because Dad had me on this gig.
You were being thrown right into the fire. You're just
I was. But then when I caught the bug, I don't know I don't really know. I can't really remember the transition from the rock to the jazz, but I was obsessed with the rock stuff, and so I think that I just carried that over to all of a sudden now jazz was king. And we were like checking out, like Michael Brecker was putting out, like his records were coming out like at that point, like his first record and his second record. Yeah. So we were just like, so like taken with, what's he what is he doing and what's happening?
Who doesn't love Michael Brecker?
Yeah, exactly.
Brecker's the greatest. Yeah.
I think just hearing that, and there was an older player in town, Don Alco, who's a little bit older than me, but at that time seemed way older than me. Like great tenor player, was telling me about players to check out. There was another guy, Eric Byers, that was like, man, you need to check out Smoke It at the Half Note, Wes Montgomery. So I had some older players as well as my teachers kind of pushing me in the direction of check these players out, and I just caught the bug and never really looked back.
A lot of it was listening, being inspired, and absorbing things from records and live players. Yeah. I ask because, sometimes people will say, that they make the transition by first learning some basic licks, like you might learn a handful of 2-5-1 licks, for example, and then, you can start applying them to chord changes. And then other people will say, they got their starting vocabulary directly from records, from pulling off little licks.
It was probably both. I remember I got like a Les Wise had a book called Bebop Vocabulary, and I remember seeing that, and I purchased it. And I don't know if I adopted much of that, but it was kind of interesting to see that, how he crafted the lines. And then there was like all the David Baker How to Play Bebop books. Mm-hmm. So I remember my freshman year, I did like in between my freshman and sophomore year, I did a Cedar Point gig. And like everybody in the band was from Indiana University. And they're just like, oh, bro, like, you know, do you know the bebop scales? And I was like, no one's told me about that yet. And so they showed me that stuff. And that was really kind of the point where I was like, it started clicking, where I'm transcribing a lick from like Doug Rainey, but I don't exactly know like, why is he doing this? What is the purpose behind this? Then once I started checking out the David Baker stuff and like that, dealing with the chromaticism, like it started to click more, where I'm like, oh, this is why this works, and this is why this is happening, and I think that this is why this player is making these choices.
Right. Yeah, and David Baker kind of masterminded that whole pedagogical side of...
He did. He cornered the bebop market, at that point, for sure.
That's a good way to put it. I didn't think about it in the commercial sense. That's funny, though.
But yeah, those were great books. Like, they were well laid out. You know, like the books that came out when I was that age, I felt like really had some like heavy material in them. But listening was still key. Like I realized at that age, like the knowledge isn't in the book. This is just kind of putting a name to what I'm hearing already. And so now I kind of understand it academically, I guess.
Because wouldn't you say sometimes the issue with learning those patterns and licks is that people never move off of them, really, but really the idea is to just use those as a basis for your own improvisations.
Yeah, I've had some students that end up being really great players, but their initial process is they just memorize a bunch of 2/5s. Mm-hmm. And I hear them play and I think like, yeah, you know, I can hear it. Like I can hear the language. I understand what you're saying, but I can tell that you're just putting this word here, this word here. Yeah. So now we have to kind of fill in those gaps, so it just isn't you playing like a 2/5 lick after 2/5 lick.
More like a classical musician just playing the...
Exactly. And I think once they understand why, like how the ideas are put together and why they work and why they sound a certain way, I think that's where the real progress happens.
Absorbing the actual concept behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one thing I'm curious about, since we're talking about kind of bridging from rock into jazz and developing the material for improvisation, since you've taught a lot of students, what's your approach to teaching the fretboard? Because often, you know, we have players that are starting off in rock and maybe just playing down near the first 2 or 3 frets. And it's kind of scary, for them to go explore the rest of the fretboard, which is really necessary, you know, if you want to be free as an improviser, right? So do you have an approach or a method to getting students familiar with the neck?
Yeah, so when I did my undergrad, I went to Duquesne University, and my 2 main teachers were there. I studied with Joe Negri, but then I studied with a guy named Ken Karsh, and another great guitar player, Mark Cook. They were really big into the 3 on a string system. Okay. So learning, if I'm learning my major modes, like each mode has its own 3 on a string fingering. And that, I know some players use the cage system. I never really did that as a younger player. I found that doing the 3 on a string, like, major has its own fingering, Dorian has a fingering, Phrygian has a fingering. Somehow that helped me learn the neck better than the cage system, because there seemed to be more overlap and a little bit more confusion for me on how do I play certain phrases. So I use that more with my students, like 3 on a string. I just think it's easier to digest initially.
And as you're teaching people to do that, are you advising them to say the notes on the neck?
I kind of like a game, like I like the game where I'll just kind of say like G, play a G everywhere on the neck as fast as possible, and have them kind of go through like E string, like up on the E string, B string, G string, D string, and just go through each note and see how quickly can I find that note, and are there certain areas where I'm stumbling? Like, can I nail it in the 1 through 5 region and above the 12th fret, but like 7 through 10 seems to be a trouble spot. Mm-hmm. Now just take those 12 notes and just say like, okay, D flat. In position 7, find as many D flats as you can as quickly as possible. Are there are they outside of that position? So just literally saying the note and seeing it on the neck and then playing that note. Right. To make that connection. And just read it. Like, I think reading standard notation, like there was a great, I don't know if you ever checked out, Tom Bruner wrote a book on sight reading, and he wrote these like kind of weird sounding atonal etudes. Like, they weren't scale patterns, they had no real language, it was just, throwing stuff on a page. And he talked about reading in regions, where it was like you'd read from the 1st through the 6th fret, the 6th through like the 11th or 12th fret, and then 12th fret and beyond. And so I think reading, forcing the students to read in 7th or 8th position helps, because that seems to be the trouble spot. Like, get above the 5th fret and all of a sudden there's lots more I don't know these notes. Right. So just getting them reading to, again, kind of make the connection of, I'm seeing an A, here's where this A is on the B string, or here's where it is on the G string, and making that connection. Because like the scales, like the scale fingerings, it's like we memorize those so quickly that guys can just like fly through those fingerings and still have no idea what they're playing or where they're playing. They just know that I played this. You just
memorize it, the fingering, and you're not really aware of what the actual notes are, or maybe even the key that you're playing in.
So I think saying the notes. I mean, even I don't do this a lot with my students, but even improvising over a tune at an incredibly slow tempo, and then just trying to either say the notes or think the notes as you're playing. So like 40 beats per minute, 8th notes. And really trying to think, I'm playing like I'm enclosing an E flat, D, F, E, D, E flat, G, working on just like chord tone exercises, like play through this tune, like Stella by Starlight, just play me the thirds, just play me the fifths. And so it's like I feel like they start to get the recognition of like, what's the fifth of an E half diminished chord, B flat, where is that note on the guitar neck? I have to find that stuff. So just any games to kind of get them thinking of a note and where it is on the neck, I think helps. It never, like, it doesn't hurt. Like, there's never like a downside to it. Some guys just like take off and get it, and some are more like this, but it always helps improve their knowledge, I think.
In terms of people getting it or not getting it, what is the role of talent to you? And maybe what are some of the traits that you've found in your students that excel the fastest and go the furthest? Do you see certain commonalities in the way they practice and prepare?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's like, I know everybody's kind of like the Malcolm Gladwell, like the 10,000 hours. Talent doesn't matter if you put the 10,000 hours in. Yeah. I can say for certain that over the years, there are students that just have an aptitude, let's not say talent, they just can pick things up. Where I had a tenor saxophonist, Alex De Litzari, who's in New York now, and he was in high school, and he came to me just for improvisation lessons. And I would show him like, hey, Alex, like here's a tritonic, like this 3-note pattern. Here's how you use it in improvisation. And like literally 2 weeks later, he'd come back and I'd be like, what did you just do? What was that? And he's like, I figured out that I could just like superimpose it here and just do that. So as a high school player, like Alex had a high amount of aptitude where I could just show him something and he would pick it up immediately. But then I have students that it takes them a little longer. They don't maybe grasp it as quickly, but I think that they can overcome that just with dedication and obsession. Like I had a student that I just graduated, a kid named Nareg Bogosian, who literally for the last 4 years practiced 7 to 8 hours every day. Like I think if he missed a day, he would probably have like a panic attack. And he was talented, is talented, but then also worked 8 or 9 hours a day.
Wow.
And his progress was like, I had never seen progression like that in my 20 some years of teaching. Like he, even with sight reading, he just told me one week, he said, I've decided I'm going to dedicate myself to getting good at sight reading. And so he just started reading stuff like hours and hours a day. And within probably 4 months, this kid could read almost anything that I could put in front of him at a pretty high level. So
this is like dynamite when you combine the talent with the hard work. Would you say that that's rare? So that's more of a rare thing to find?
He and Alex are pretty rare. I think most of us kind of sit in the like talented, but maybe not like a genius. Like some of these students that I run into, like I don't like to throw a word like genius around that much, but they just have like an incredibly high aptitude. They pick stuff up. The rest of the students that are like talented, they just have to make it up with hard work. And I try to instill in them that if you're practicing an hour or two a day in college, you're just behind, because there's somebody out there that's practiced as much as you have this week in like 2 days.
Would you say that these people who have the talent and also put in the hard work behind that, there's always the actual passion for the music, that they're just so deeply compelled to do music?
I feel like the folks that work the hardest have the most appreciation. But that's not to say that the students that I've had that have a high aptitude don't appreciate the music, but I think that there is like a extra layer of attachment for someone that's just busting their butt and like practicing constantly, and then they end up achieving kind of like a high level of playing, and they get kind of the validation from peers, other faculty, like players in town. I think that they appreciate that. Whereas maybe the student that picks everything up quickly has like a certain level of appreciation, but I think that they just are like, I just do this. I just did this. I didn't really have to put in a lot of time on it.
They take it for granted, so maybe a little bit.
Maybe, yeah.
A little bit more.
Yeah, they just, it's like they, the kid that has to practice 10 hours a day to get where the kid that practices 4 hours a day, I think that they just have there's like that additional layer of appreciation. Like I overcame like some of the obstacles, and now I'm playing at a level that I'm content with, or that I wanted to play at.
I'm almost thinking that it makes maybe like a loop, like a feedback loop, where the person works, they achieve something, and so they get some external motivation, which then drives them to keep going.
Absolutely,
into the next
absolutely. And I think like as an undergrad and just throughout my life, like we've all seen like uber talented people that don't really necessarily put the work in, and at some point maybe their progression stops, like they've hit their limit for where their talent can take them. So whatever the level, I try to instill like the work ethic, because we're all gonna top out at some point if we're not working hard at it. Like, talent or aptitude's only gonna take us to a certain point, and then there's a certain point where I realize like, man, I gotta really practice this. Like I just can't do this. I can't show up to the gig and just pull this out. Like I need to work on this. So I think the hard work for any level is important. I just think I've just seen it over the years. Like some students can get to a certain level with a little bit less time on the instrument, and some kids just can kind of like physically play the instrument.
Have you had times where a student just wasn't motivated and like you kind of got stuck in terms of teaching? If so, are there things that you do as a teacher to try to provide that motivation?
Yeah, so I've had some I haven't had a lot of students over my career, but I've had a few students that just, I don't know, they just don't seem like they're that interested in doing it. Like, and these are jazz guitar, like people that are, you know, consciously deciding to be like a jazz guitar performance major. Like I would tell them, I'm pretty sure your parents didn't push you to be a jazz guitar performance major. Yeah. I'm sure your grandparents or your other friends didn't push you. And they just don't, I don't know if they don't get the passion or if they just don't take it seriously enough. But I have had students like that. And I do think that I do take responsibility for trying to motivate students like that. But
do you have a go-to kind of approach towards motivation? For me, sometimes it's suggesting recordings. You know, I'll have them. Sure. I want them to actually listen to the artist, whether it's Hendrix or whoever, and just say, "Wow, look how cool that is." You know.
Sure. Yeah, the players. I try to meet them. Like if someone comes in, maybe they were like a rock player, they switch to jazz, they're a jazz major, but they're not that interested. Like I might say, hey man, like check out Mike Stern and Alan Holdsworth. Like right there's two guys to me that are like the highest level of jazz musicians, but there is definitely like a heavy connection to rock, like both tonally, like phrasing. Yeah. And sometimes that'll do it. Sometimes what motivates them is that their friends are progressing. And that their friends maybe don't want to play with them after a certain period of time because they've gotten to a certain level and now they want to play with the other. So
it's a little bit of shame and a little bit of fear and disappointment.
A little bit of shame, like, you know, if you want your buddy to like call you for their recital or a gig, like maybe you got to like put some time in. Yeah. But there have been, you know, unfortunately, a few students that they go through and I just don't know if they ever catch the passion. Right. We have, like at George Mason, like we've set up, and I think North Texas has this and other schools, like we've set up like a barrier jury at the end of the sophomore year. And you do a jury that's meant to show the faculty, can I go on and present a successful junior and senior recital? Like meet that criteria at the level that's expected. And I've had one or two students that at that point, we just have to have that serious conversation with them that, you know, I don't know if jazz guitar is necessarily your calling, but that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I would imagine, if you're going to school and paying for it, it would be kind of rare. Yeah. But, you know, maybe I think sometimes that people like the idea of doing something more than the actual work, doing the actual work that's required to get there.
Absolutely. Like I've had one, I won't name them, but I had one student that kind of like never caught the bug with guitar, but was super talented musician. So I think that they'll end up doing fine, like have a successful career in the music industry, in the business. But maybe not as a jazz guitar player.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough. So now I want to talk a little bit about your own playing. I love your playing, by the way, if I haven't said so. And I was back at you. Oh, thanks. I was listening to a bunch of your recordings, and I wanted to ask you about how you incorporate material into your playing for your improvising and your soloing. You know, if like, for example, sometimes I hear you go into motivic ideas, or sometimes, you know, there'll be a really nice pattern that will emerge. So, you know, for example, do you practice things like patterns or repetitive motivic ideas in your practicing? And then how do you actually make sure that they stick?
That's a great question. Yeah, I definitely practice like I don't know if they've really stuck yet, but I've been like on a obsession of like just trying to get more triadic like pairs of triads, upper structure triads. Like Peter Bernstein's like a big hero of mine, and like I've always been taken with that. And so yeah, I'll practice like the triad pairs and try to work on trying to find some rhythmic. Like I definitely suffer from like the overplayers. Like I'm definitely on the 12-step program for overplaying anonymous. Like where I'm always wanting to play more rhythmically, and I love rhythmic players, so I try to work on rhythmic things in my practice.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm always successful getting that into my playing.
And how will you go about practicing those things? Do you tend to write out exercises for yourself? Do you have books that you use? How do you go about it?
I think now, like I'll write out like an etude. So if I have like a certain concept like triad pairs, I'll take a tune I'm working on, like a standard, and I'll try to craft, okay, like in a perfect world, if I could improvise this would be how I would want to use the concept.
Okay.
This is rhythmically how I would want to do it. This is melodically how I would shape it. Here are some, like, how I would, like, harmonically, like, impose it in different harmonic situations. And I would write out here, like, if I could play this concept like this is my end. Kind of like.
So would you write out, would this be like a chorus of improvisation on a tune, something like that? Or would they just be phrases?
Yeah, chorus,
okay.
Or like even just like, here's this particular idea over a 2/5, here it is in a minor 2/5, here it is if I like superimpose it, like if I go outside the harmony, how can I sort of bring this idea back into the harmony? Is there some kind of, like there's a, I don't know if I can explain it on camera, but like there's an idea that Michael Brecker and Joey Calderazzo and those guys would play that's like this, it's like minor thirds going up in like whole steps and fourths. And
okay.
So, and they couple it with like a minor 7 arpeggio, and then they ascend this like intervallic sequence, and then maybe there's another minor 7 arpeggio down, and then it kind of keeps, you can kind of move it however you want to do it. So I just like sitting down thinking like, okay, if I start on a B flat blues with this idea over like an A minor 7 arpeggio, which has nothing to do with B flat 7, if I do 4 of these ascended minor third intervals going up in whole steps, do I arrive at the F minor 7 where I want to do a 2/5 to get to the 4 chord in the blues progression?
Wow. That's
and
really
how many of those do I have to do? And if I start here, how many of those do I have to do if I start here? If I keep going down, like so I'm kind of trying to play with, if I do it on a 2/5, how many different sequences do I have to get through to resolve right when the 1 chord happens? How many times do I have to do it to delay the resolution by a beat or 2 beats?
So
yeah.
If I got this straight, you're taking a concept, like a theoretical concept that you want to work on, and then you're writing it out in the form of an etude or as an improvisation or something over a chorus in sort of an ideal way.
Yes.
Like compositionally, how you would like your lines to sound using that particular concept.
Yeah, figuring out how do I get from literally point A to point B, and what does that look like, and like we have control over it because we're taking our time writing it, thinking about it, and I can sort of manipulate it to be very inside and diatonic sounding, or what happens when I'm very outside and it's not diatonic at all. How do I get it back to that being diatonic?
Now, once you write out something like that, what do you do next? What's your next step? Do you learn it? Or is it just writing it out is
like
enough?
Learning it on the neck? So it's like all those kind of Brecker like intervallic things, like fourths. They, for me anyways, they don't really lay well on guitar. It's like everything I love hearing when I try to play it, for some reason, those are the things that I'm like, this does not lay well on the instrument. So,
fourths are hard.
Fourths are hard. And so I'll just take that idea without any harmony and just kind of run it, and sort of think about shape. And so if I'm descending the minor 7 arpeggio and then going up a sequence of these minor thirds, I'll just keep doing it until I get to a point and try another minor 7th, and then another minor 7th, another minor 7th to get down to the bottom of the neck, and then try to climb again these intervallic sequences, just to try to get some kind of mechanical fluency, so that if I'm using the idea, I'm not going to stumble when I try to that's the worst thing, is like try to play this idea that I'm hearing, and all of a sudden like my hands are just don't do that, and it's a mess. Just can I mechanically just do this without any kind of intervallic or harmonic implications? Just play the idea, move it around the neck, and then just put on like some kind of track, maybe going through like the cycle of fourths, and just say, okay, I'm going to play this idea over like a major 2/5 in all 12 keys, starting from this particular scale degree. Try to resolve to the scale degree. Try it with minor 2/5s, 3/6 2/5s, backdoor 2. Like, what does it look like if it's a backdoor 2/5? What does it look like? I remember you like that kind of like sharp 4 to 7 to 1. Like, does it work in that kind of harmonic sequence? Just how do I get this to work? Like, if I do it on a rhythm changes A section, and I start at point A, how many of these sequences do I have to do to hit the E flat major chord and the B flat rhythm changes? Like, how does that look? And just kind of just write out different kind of like choose your own endings or choose your own resolutions, and then practice that.
And once you've done that, how long or how often will you revisit that? Will you kind of stick with that for, I don't know, a week or two, or every practice session it just kind of write out some new stuff?
That's a great question. I just was talking to a student about this earlier today, and I try to hang with the stuff, but some of the things that I practice, I all of a sudden, like if I did a gig tonight, they would pop out, and then some of the things I practice, for some reason, like I've diminished, like half whole diminished hates me, because I've worked on half whole diminished like periodically off and on for like the last 15 years, and yet I still feel like I'm like totally at like ground zero. Like I can't effectively use, like, why is this not working? So I just kind of periodically revisit it and hope that at some point it will kind of end up in my playing a little bit more organically.
Yeah, because I always wonder about that, how certain things stick, and if there's more of a way to proactively make that happen. But sometimes I feel that, like for me, there are certain patterns or licks I come across that they instantly feel natural to me or something. Maybe the way they're laid out, and it's like they stick from the get-go almost.
Yeah, that's like the great mystery of music to me, is that why does this idea stick and come out immediately, and why does this other concept, I work on it for 2 months, and unless I consciously think about it, it's never really there. It's like I hear it, like if I'm singing a solo in my head or improvising like verbally or in my mind's ear, it's like it's there. But then when I play a gig, like I just go back to the same old stuff that's I always play. Yeah, I've never really figured that out, honestly.
In a way, it seems like maybe recognizing the stuff that sticks points to each person's unique identity, because probably it comes down to the way that everybody hears in their own unique way.
Yeah, it could be like the first jazz guitar player that I heard that really knocked me out was probably Jimmy Rainey and Pat Martino.
Yeah.
And so I have to think that because those guys were so like chromatic and linear and bebop, that for some reason all that stuff to me, like I feel like I can just play that ad nauseum without thinking much about it. But then the next layer of players that I started checking out, like the Breckers, Schofield, like they were doing much more kind of like intervallic stuff. and that stuff is like it doesn't quite come as easily for me still. So I don't know if it's like the first thing that people check out and get obsessed with is sort of.
I think part of it has to do with what you said before, is the way that some of those other intervallic things don't necessarily fall as naturally on the guitar neck.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's almost like a little bit of an extra, like, direction you have to push into.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird though, because I kind of feel like, obviously we're all mostly influenced by our immediate family and then our initial friends, maybe. So I feel like our personalities are sort of starting to be kind of codified as younger folks, and then we encounter people throughout our life, and they have an effect on us, but our basic personality maybe is, I don't want to say preformed, but it's like there.
It's really solid.
Yeah, so like maybe the first thing that people, like the first players that people listen to seem to be the concepts and the styles that the students like get quicker. And maybe it's because that was like their musical parent. Like Pat Martino. I look at Pat Martino as like, if I could choose my parents musically, he's like my mom and my dad. Like just his playing like really floored me. And so everything he does now seems to be accessible to me. Whereas like, I don't know, a guy like, not Jerry Bergonzi, George Garzone, for instance, like his playing to me still like just floors me because I kind of know what he's doing intellectually, but I can't do it at all. I like look back at like young me and I think like, okay, what if George Garzone would have been the first person that everybody turned me on to? Like how would that have changed? Like what if it wasn't Pat Martino? What if it was like somebody like an avant-garde, like somebody avant-garde? It would have had to have pushed me. I would have had to have become a different player. I'm convinced that would have created a whole different path, maybe.
Yeah. I've been thinking about making this new little section in these interviews where I have a couple of little categories where I want to ask you what your top 3 are. So, for example, jazz guitar albums that you might recommend to a new student who you're trying to get them inspired and sort of getting an idea of what jazz guitar is all about.
Okay, so top 3 that just pop into my head would be Pat Martino, either Footprints or El Hombre. So I'll count that as one. Okay. And then Pat Metheny, Question and Answer, the trio with Roy Haynes and Dave Holland. And then I would say Joe Pass, Virtuoso.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So that would be the first 3 that popped into my head.
What about, let's say, beginning jazz tunes, especially if somebody's coming from a rock background and now, often the first tune for somebody like that is the blues, or you kind of show them the difference between, a basic 1-4-5 blues and now how it becomes a jazz blues. Maybe what are, some of the other really good starting tunes or standards?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think like Blue Bossa is that's a great tune. I know that like, it's probably been overplayed for years and years and years, but still a great tune. And modal, but then it has a little bit of 2/5 material in it. Boy, that's a good question. Now I'm kind of blanking. I think like Autumn Leaves, I think was good initially because like I would have teachers say you can kind of just use sort of like that Aeolian sound through a lot of it and not really play the changes sort of play in like key areas. So I think that's a good one. Plus that has like minor 2/5, 2/5s. Boy, what are some other ones?
What about a rhythm changes?
Yeah, I think rhythm changes like a more like not quite as like harmonically mashed up rhythm changes, like real diatonic, maybe like the B flat 6, G minor, C, F, that kind of thing. And teaching them, how to play a blues scale that it works over the A sections, great blues scale over blues progression, like blues ideas just in like 2/5, like thinking about Benson and Grant Green, like putting like bluesy ideas in 2/5s and teaching them like that. So yeah, rhythm changes, blues, blue bossa, and then like honestly, I would probably start them off like a really great tune that I learned when I was younger is "Afternoon in Paris."
Okay, yeah.
Just because it has like it's not like an incredibly challenging tune, but it's got 2/5 material, but it's not so complex that it is going to make someone want to quit playing. Like it's a really great intro to just like 2/5s, like moving key centers. Like Take the A Train. It's kind of another one where it's like it's a jazz progression, but it's got C major for a while. Like, how do I deal with this D dominant chord?
Right.
There is a 2/5. There's some key switching. I think like those tunes would be.
So it's got a nice balance of some 2/5s, but also you can stay in a couple key centers, maybe, for
dip your toes into like switching keys, but not like not start them off with like Inner Urge.
Right.
Right.
And then they would quit.
Or if they don't seem like they're into it, start them off with Inner Urge, and then that might,
Have there been, let's say, 2 or 3 really important books for you as you were developing that you worked on exercises or method books?
Yeah, so I would say the 3 that come to mind would be like but they're series. This is the David Baker, like the How to Play Bebop books, like especially book 1, just to learn that concept. He had ideas that he transcribed that you could work on. The Jerry Bergonzi has like a 7-volume series called Inside Improvisation.
Okay.
Those were like earth-shattering, like, future generation altering for me, like, because he talked about melodic structures, bebop scales, triad pairs, like atonal things, pentatonics. It was like those 7 books it was like he had given the world everything.
Expanded
like,
your whole vocabulary, your whole palette.
Yeah, so those 7 books were really great. And then like the Barry Galbraith Logical Fingerings workbook was great. I had my teacher, either Ken Karsh or Mark Cook, had me work out of those etudes, and Barry kind of taught you, he would give you like fingerings at certain points along the way, and you had to go through and try to hit his points where he had like 3rd finger on the G string. He had like a method of how to play certain ideas logically to get from point A to point B.
Was it sort of like connect the dots for the guitar fretboard where...
It was, except he would only really give you like there'd be like 12 measures of 8th notes, and then all of a sudden like you should be on your 2nd finger on the B string here. And then here's another 10 measures, and here
that's an interesting idea. I didn't know about this book. This is called Logical Fingerings?
Yeah, it's called the Logical Fingerings Workbook.
Okay.
And I think he has a series as well that's really great. He had like guitar comping, logical fingerings, melodic minor studies, and there was like a couple other ones. And like they were really, like Barry was great.
Yeah, I love his guitar comping book. I think to me that's a big, great
equal
book.
to that, but with just like left-hand mechanics.
Okay.
And then at the cool thing is at the end of that book, the final etudes are like 2-5-1 etude in all 12 keys and minor 2-5 in all 12 keys. It's like all this like great bebop language is like a bonus. It's just like there in the back.
Yeah.
So that's a good
one.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So those 3 things were most important, I think.
Yeah. Are there any apps that you use? Anything on your phone or how about for... Well, that might be a separate thing. I was going to ask you sort of about self-assessment and whether or not you video yourself or anything while you're practicing. But are there do you use any modern tools like any, digital real books or metronomes or ear training apps or anything, whether it's for you or for your students?
Yeah, I use iReal Pro.
Okay.
just for tunes. I like the Drum Genius, which is really great. I use that to practice, but I also use it to write. So like if I'm writing like a tune that's like an Afro-Cuban thing, I'll have that feel going and sort of write with that feel.
Are these just drum loops?
Yeah, it's like I think they have like 430 drum loops, and it sounds pretty realistic. And you can pick, like they have like 7 different sambas, and you can switch the tempos, and you can even kind of tune the drums to be like darker or brighter. That's really cool. I use Transcribe, like the desktop version, to transcribe stuff. Like slow down things. So like Transcribe Plus, I think on my phone I have.
Okay. I was just thinking of one last question maybe here is, how you feel about all of the material that's available now for young students, YouTube, and, how much there is out there versus maybe when we were coming up.
Yeah. I feel like I'm like the old guy now. It's like, I didn't have any of this stuff when I was a kid.
Is there an upside and a downside that you see to, having such a flood of material available?
Yeah, I feel like the upside, I mean, I guess I perceive it as an upside. Some might say it's a downside. Is I feel like there's a lot more like younger players that can play at a certain level. Like they're exposed to, like, I'm sure, like, when we're growing up, if you lived in a small town and there was one guitar teacher and that guitar teacher didn't know anything about jazz, like, you just had no real exposure to jazz. Now, that same kid in that same small town can hop on YouTube and in 10 minutes hear every jazz guitar player that's ever existed, find all their classic records, Google what's Wes Montgomery's, like, essential record, listen to that, go online and find some of this talking about the transcription. So I think it's created more players that can play at a higher level maybe when they're younger. The downside of it, I don't know. I mean, I'll probably sound like the old dude again, but there's just a lack of like a unique voice. Like I have a record coming out, like shameless plug, I have the new record coming out September 19th.
Well, yeah, I'm going to get you to mention that for sure.
But like, so Walt Weiskopf's my guest, right? And Walt, you could play like 1,000 tenor players and play me 5 seconds of Walt Weiskopf mixed in between that, and I would immediately know that's Walt Weiskopf. Same thing with like Coltrane, same thing with Sonny Stitt. Like these players, like Chris Potter, John Scofield, Mike Stern, they have such a distinct thing.
Yeah.
That within a few seconds, maybe 10, 15 seconds, you're already like pinpointing, I think it's this person. And then after another like 30 seconds, you're like, yeah, that's Walt or John Scofield or whoever.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we have like, that's like, I go on Instagram and I see all these like phenomenal players that play stuff that I'll never be able to play, technique like crazy, but I'm like, I don't like, what is your sound or what is your like personality? I don't hear it. I just hear shred.
It's interesting because, and I agree with you, I think that the nature of the medium, the social media, the algorithms are in fact influencing the style and the way that people play, because nowadays you really have to be very performative if you want to get a rise out of people. And I think that maybe a lot of the players that I know that I loved, coming up wouldn't have necessarily made it on social media. Some of the maybe players that weren't so flashy, but had a really unique thing and gave off.
And it's like I I joked with one of my students. I was like, yeah, man, I've really been checking out this. They unearthed this Grant Green record, and he's like, really, what was it? And I said, it was just Grant Green playing 1 minute reels like as fast as he possibly could. And the student was like, are you serious? And I'm like, no, I'm not serious. But I'm like, think about like, and I won't name players, and there are so many phenomenal technicians out there, but I don't know. Like I think Instagram and maybe Facebook, but more Instagram. I'm not even on TikTok, but it's like you have to like floor people within, I don't know, what is it, like 90 seconds is the length of a reel. And usually, like, if you do a video, if I post a video and I boost a video, like I did that for a while just to see what happens, it'll be like watch time, and it'll be like 1,000 people watched it for 3 seconds, and then all of a sudden it's like 5 seconds, and then like, and I was thinking like, man, no one's even watching this past, like if I don't do something in the first 6 seconds, they've already moved.
That's why,
next reel, and I was like, what is this doing to the music business and just music in general?
Tell us about your new album that you're releasing. I know you have 2 albums that you've released under your own name, right? Already?
Yes.
And now you have a new one coming up. So tell people where they can find that, and just where they can find you in general, your website, or maybe some of your social media handles.
Sure. So it's a record called Oblivity, and it's going to be released on September 19th on Origin Records. And I think that there's a single they can already listen to. Quiet the Chaos is already on all the streaming platforms. So September 19th, it'll be available. Really, to keep up with me, if you go to ShawnPurcell.com, I try to be real diligent about keeping up with all my dates, like performing dates, where to buy the CD. They can purchase it from me. They can stream it. But I try to keep everything up to date on my website. So that's probably the best place to go. And yeah, we're playing Chris's in Philadelphia on September 23rd, Blues Alley on the 30th, doing some stuff in New York, hopefully in October, Nashville in November. Like we kind of have some stuff like each month out of town, more on kind of like the East Coast through the South.
Shawn, thank you so much for this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
I think there's a lot in here for people to learn, and I will include in the metadata in the video, in the description, and the comments, some of the links to your site and so forth that you mentioned. And for people that are watching, always please, in the comments, leave me any questions that you want me to ask future interviewees that I speak with, specifically about practicing. And I think that'll wrap it up for here. So,
thank you, Greg.
Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. It was great speaking with you.
You too. All right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.